In the vast expanse of the far reaches galaxy, where stars burned like ancient beacons, guiding civilizations through the cosmic night, two empires stood at the precipice of war. The human domain, led by their legendary marksman, Emperor Jackson Vale, and the crystalline realm of Eloria, where Empress Solari wielded powers beyond mortal comprehension. Their story would become legend, a tale of sacrifice, redemption, and the birth of an alliance that would reshape the destiny of countless worlds. The grand chamber of the crystalline palace gleamed with refracted light, casting rainbow patterns across the faces of the assembled dignitaries. Empress Solari of Eloria sat upon her levitating throne, her alabaster skin luminescent against the deep purple of her ceremonial robes. Tendrils of psionic energy occasionally flickered around her temples, a visible manifestation of her formidable mental powers. With a mere thought, she could bend the will of lesser beings or shatter stone. Such was the birthright of Elorian royalty. She surveyed the gathered representatives with thinly veiled contempt. The humans, with their crude technology and even cruder emotions, had requested this diplomatic summit. Years of border skirmishes and resource disputes had brought their civilizations to the brink of open warfare. This meeting was supposedly their last chance for peace. Emperor Vale approaches. "Your Radiance," announced Lyra, her spiritual guardian and most trusted advisor. The tall, willowy Elorian's silver eyes narrowed with suspicion. "Let him come," Solari replied, her melodic voice echoing with power. "I wish to see what manner of leader these humans have chosen." The massive crystal doors parted, and a hush fell over the assembly. Emperor Jackson Vale entered, his movements deliberate and measured. Unlike the ornate regalia of the Elorian court, his attire was practical, a formal military uniform bearing the insignia of the human alliance. What caught Solari's attention, however, was his obvious physical impairment. The human emperor walked with a pronounced limp, and his right arm appeared partially immobilized, encased in an exoskeleton of medical technology. Solari felt a flicker of surprise. The legends of Jackson Vale, the marksman who could split atoms with his aim, the warrior who had led human forces to victory in the Outer Rim conflicts. They spoke nothing of disability. "Empress Solari," Jackson bowed, maintaining perfect balance despite his condition. "I bring greetings from Earth and the Human Confederation." "Emperor Vale," she acknowledged coldly. "Your reputation precedes you, though I admit it appears somewhat exaggerated." A muscle twitched in Jackson's jaw, but he maintained his composure. "Reputations often are, Your Radiance. I find reality far more interesting." Their verbal sparring might have continued, but fate had other plans. A flash of movement caught Jackson's eye, a shimmer of displacement in the air near one of the crystalline columns. His soldier's instinct, honed through decades of combat, triggered an immediate response. "Down!" he shouted, lunging forward with surprising speed for a man with his injuries. In that fraction of a second, several things happened simultaneously. An Elorian assassin materialized from behind a stealth field, energy weapon already discharging. Solari's guards moved to intercept, but they were positioned too far away. And Jackson Vale, former legendary marksman and current emperor of humanity, threw himself directly into the path of the energy bolt. The shot struck him squarely in the chest, the impact throwing him backward. His body crashed against the steps leading to Solari's throne, the smell of charred flesh filling the air. The room erupted into chaos, guards subduing the assassin, dignitaries scrambling for safety, Elorian healers rushing forward. Through the commotion, Empress Solari remained frozen, her gaze fixed on the fallen human emperor. Their eyes met briefly before Jackson's closed in pain. In that fleeting moment, Solari saw something that shook her to her core. Not fear, not regret, but certainty. He had made his choice knowingly. A human had willingly sacrificed himself for her, the empress of a people who considered his kind barely more evolved than animals. "Secure the assassin!" Lyra was shouting, taking command as Solari remained momentarily stunned. "And get our healers to the human emperor immediately!" Solari finally found her voice. "Who sent you?" she demanded of the captured assassin, her psionic powers flaring dangerously. The assassin, his features contorted with fanaticism, spat on the floor. "Death to those who would surrender our glory to human filth. Lord Vorash knows your weakness. Empress, your reign ends today." Grand Vizier Vorash, her own chief minister. The betrayal stung. But Solari pushed aside personal feelings to focus on the immediate crisis. The human emperor lay dying on her palace floor, having taken a shot meant for her. The political implications alone were staggering, but something deeper troubled her, something that felt uncomfortably like guilt. "Take Emperor Vale to the healing chambers," she commanded. "Use whatever means necessary to stabilize him." As the human was carefully lifted onto a hovering medical platform, Solari made a decision that would alter the course of galactic history. "No one outside this room is to know what truly happened here," she declared. "As far as the public is concerned, there was an assassination attempt that failed. No mention of who saved whom." The following hours passed in a blur of emergency sessions with her advisors, security reviews, and the quiet arrest of several officials suspected of loyalty to Vorash. The Grand Vizier himself had disappeared, gone to ground before he could be apprehended. Throughout it all, Solari found her thoughts returning to the human emperor. When she finally slipped away to the healing chambers, she found Jackson Vale suspended in a regeneration field, his life signs barely stable. The Elorian healers looked grave. "The energy bolt caused extensive damage. Your radiance," the chief healer explained. "We can keep him alive, but full recovery." He hesitated. "Human physiology responds poorly to our conventional healing methods." Solari studied the floating form of the Emperor. Even unconscious, his face retained the determination she had glimpsed earlier. This man had shown courage beyond what she had believed possible in a human, and he had saved her life. "Leave us," she commanded. When the healers had departed, Solari approached the regeneration field. What she was contemplating went against every tradition of her people, sacred knowledge reserved only for Elorian royalty. But an ancient code of her civilization demanded that life debts be honored, regardless of who was involved. "You will not die today, Emperor Vale," she whispered, placing her hands on either side of the energy field. "Not when you have shown me something I believed extinct in this galaxy, true nobility of spirit." Closing her eyes, Solari reached deep within herself, accessing the ancestral power that flowed through her bloodline. Luminescent energy began to pour from her fingertips into the regeneration field, mingling with the human's damaged cells, accelerating healing in ways Elorian medical science alone could not achieve. Hours passed as Solari channeled her life force into Jackson Vale. By the time she finished, exhaustion threatened to overwhelm her, but satisfaction replaced her fatigue. The human emperor would live, and more than that, she had done something no empress had done in living memory: use the royal healing for an outsider. When she finally returned to her chambers, Lyra was waiting, her expression troubled. "You used the royal healing on him," Lyra stated. It wasn't a question. "I did. The council will see this as sacrilege." Solari lifted her chin. "The council will see what I wish them to see. Emperor Vale saved my life at risk of his own. The ancient laws are clear about life debts. Laws that were never meant to apply to humans," Lyra argued. "Your radiance. I must caution you, this action will have consequences. Grand Vizier Vorash already has sympathizers on the council. They will use this to question your judgment." "Let them question," Solari replied, her voice hardening. "I am still Empress of Eloria, but more importantly, I am right. What manner of ruler would I be if I allowed the person who saved my life to die, when I had the power to save him? Lyra bowed her head in acquiescence, though her expression remained troubled. What will you do with him once he recovers? It was a good question, one Solari herself hadn't fully considered. Protocol would demand she send him back to his people with appropriate honors. Political expediency might suggest using his recovery as leverage in negotiations. But something deeper stirred within her. Curiosity. Perhaps. What manner of being was this human emperor who would risk everything for an enemy? I wish to understand him, she said finally. Before he returns to his people, I would know why he did what he did. And Vorash? Lyra prompted. Solari's expression darkened. He will be found, and he will answer for his treason. In the days that followed, rumors spread throughout the crystalline spires of the Aelorian capital. Some spoke of the failed assassination attempt, others of the human emperor's bravery. Still, others whispered of the Empress spending hours alone in the healing chambers, emerging exhausted but determined. 7 days after the incident, Jackson Vale opened his eyes. He awoke to unfamiliar surroundings. A chamber of pale blue crystal, illuminated by soft light that seemed to emanate from the walls themselves. For a moment, disorientation clouded his thoughts. Then memory returned in a rush. The diplomatic summit, the assassin, the decision to intercept the shot aimed at Empress Solari. Jackson attempted to sit up, expecting the usual pain from his war injuries. To his surprise, his body responded smoothly, without the familiar resistance of damaged nerves and muscles. He flexed his right hand, the one that had been partially paralyzed since the Outer Rim conflicts, and watched in amazement as his fingers moved with perfect coordination. The healing is complete. Then came a melodic voice from the doorway. Empress Solari stood there, her regal bearing somewhat offset by the simple white robe she wore instead of her formal court attire. Without the intimidating regalia of her station, she looked younger, though no less formidable. What happened to me? Jackson asked, his voice rough from disuse. You intercepted an energy bolt meant for me, she replied, moving into the room with fluid grace. A foolish action, by most standards. Yet here I am, alive. He studied his healed limbs with bewilderment, and apparently better than before. You are alive because I chose to make it so, Solari said, stopping at the foot of his recovery platform. Using methods reserved for Aelorian royalty. Jackson absorbed this information, understanding its significance. That would be considered controversial among your people. Indeed. Why? The directness of his question seemed to catch her off guard. Solari tilted her head slightly, studying him with those luminescent eyes that reflected starlight. You saved my life, she said simply. In Aelorian tradition, a life debt must be repaid. I see. Jackson carefully swung his legs over the edge of the platform, testing his newfound mobility. And now that the debt is repaid, what happens? Back to being enemies? Are we enemies, Emperor Vale? Solari asked, genuine curiosity in her tone. Individual enemies, not just leaders of opposing factions? Jackson considered this. I've never seen it that way. Opposition doesn't necessitate enmity. Yet you fight wars against us. I fight when necessary to protect my people. As do you. He stood, surprised at the steadiness in his legs. The question is whether fighting remains necessary. A slight smile curved Solari's lips, the first he had seen from her. You are not what I expected. Human. Jackson, he corrected. If we're going to have philosophical discussions about war and peace, you might as well use my name. Very well. Jackson. She gestured toward a seating area near a window that overlooked the crystalline city below. There are matters we must discuss. The assassin who targeted me was acting on behalf of my Grand Vizier, Vorash. Jackson's expression darkened as he followed her to the seating area. Internal power struggle? Vorash has long advocated for a more aggressive stance against humanity. It seems he decided to take matters into his own hands by eliminating me and blaming humans for the assassination. Creating a pretext for all-out war, Jackson concluded. Classic strategy. One that nearly succeeded. Solari's gaze turned to the cityscape below. Vorash has disappeared, along with several high-ranking military commanders loyal to him. My security forces are searching. But you fear he's building support for a coup? She nodded, impressed by his quick grasp of the situation. The Royal Council is divided. Some believe I have shown weakness by not immediately retaliating against humanity for the assassination attempt. Others question my use of the royal healing on you. They know about that. There are few secrets in a palace, Solari said with a hint of resignation. Which brings me to my proposal. Jackson raised an eyebrow, waiting. You saved my life. I saved yours. By rights. We should be even. You return to your empire. I to ruling mine. And we continue our cautious diplomatic dance. She turned to face him directly. But Vorash represents a threat to both our peoples. If he succeeds in overthrowing me, his first action will be to launch an all-out war against humanity. And you're suggesting we work together to stop him? Precisely. Solari leaned forward slightly. You have military expertise that even I must acknowledge as exceptional. I have resources and knowledge of Elorian society that you lack. Together, we might prevent catastrophe. Jackson's mind raced, evaluating the proposal from all angles. The diplomatic implications were enormous, as was the risk. If he agreed to stay and assist Solari, some in the Human Confederation would see it as treason. If he refused and returned home, he might be condemning both civilizations to a war that would devastate the galaxy. My people will need to know I'm alive and well, he said finally, and that I'm acting in their best interests. Of course, secure communications can be arranged, and I'll need to understand what we're up against. Vorash's capabilities, supporters, likely hideouts. Solari nodded. All information will be made available to you. Jackson stood and walked to the window, gazing out at the alien city that glittered like a geode, split open to the stars. He had spent his life fighting, first as a soldier, then as a leader, always for humanity's survival and prosperity. Now he was contemplating an alliance with a civilization many humans considered their greatest threat. But something had changed when he took that energy bolt. Something fundamental in how he viewed the Elorians, or at least their Empress. There was honor there, and a sense of duty that mirrored his own. I'll help you find Vorash, he said, turning back to Solari. Not just for humanity's sake, but because it's the right thing to do. Relief flickered across Solari's features before her regal composure reasserted itself. Then we are allies. Jackson Vale. Allies, he agreed, extending his hand in the human gesture of agreement. After a moment's hesitation, Solari reached out and clasped his hand with her own. The contact sent a strange energy thrumming through Jackson's arm, not unpleasant, but definitely alien. There will be opposition, she warned, from both our peoples. Jackson's mouth quirked in a half-smile. I've never been one to choose the easy path. Your radiance. Solari, she corrected, echoing his earlier gesture. If we are to be allies in this dangerous venture, formality seems unnecessary, and thus began an unlikely partnership that would shake the foundations of two empires and forever alter the course of galactic history. News of Emperor Vale's miraculous recovery and continued presence in the Elorian capital spread quickly through both civilizations. Official statements described it as an extended diplomatic mission following the failed assassination attempt. But rumors painted a more complex picture. Within the Crystalline Palace, Jackson found himself navigating a labyrinth of Elorian politics. Some court officials treated him with thinly veiled hostility, others with cautious respect. Lyra, the Empress's spiritual guardian, maintained a cool professionalism that bordered on suspicion. "You should not trust her so easily," Lyra said to Solari one evening as they reviewed security protocols. She cast a meaningful glance toward Jackson, who was studying star charts on the other side of the Royal Strategy Chamber. "I do not trust easily, Lyra. You know this." Solari's voice was low but firm. "But he has proven himself in ways no other has. By taking a single energy bolt, many would do the same for political advantage. It is not merely what he did, but how he did it." Solari's gaze drifted to the human emperor. There was no calculation in that moment, only instinct. And his instinct was to protect, not to harm. Lyra's silver eyes narrowed. "Humans are masters of deception. Your radiance. It is their primary evolutionary advantage. Perhaps. But I have touched his mind during the healing. There is darkness there, as in all beings, but no malice toward our people." Solari placed a hand on her advisor's arm. "Give him a chance to prove himself to you, as he has to me." Across the room, Jackson was unaware of their conversation, focused instead on tracing possible escape routes Vorash might have used. The missing Grand Vizier had covered his tracks well, but certain patterns were emerging: movements of resources, unexplained communications, mysterious ship departures. "He's gathering forces," Jackson murmured when Solari approached. "Look here, and here." He indicated several locations on the galactic map. Supply depots with suddenly increased activity. Military units reassigned to remote outposts. "He's building a power base away from your direct oversight." Solari studied the patterns with concern. "These are all within Alorian space, but in regions where my influence is, complicated by distance and local politics." "Classic insurgency tactics," Jackson explained. "Establish support in areas where central authority is already weak. Build momentum before striking at the heart." "You speak from experience." Jackson nodded, memories of past conflicts surfacing. "Before becoming emperor, I led special operations against separatist movements in the outer colonies. The patterns are similar across species and civilizations." Their eyes met, and for a moment, understanding passed between them. The shared burden of leadership, the weight of decisions that affected billions of lives. "We need better intelligence," Jackson continued, breaking the moment. "And I need to understand Alorian military capabilities if I'm going to help counter Vorash effectively. Some of what you ask involves our most closely guarded secrets," Solari said carefully. "I'm not asking for weapon schematics or defense codes," Jackson assured her. "Just operational parameters, how your forces think, move, respond. Vorash knows all this already. I need to know it too if I'm going to anticipate his moves." After consideration, Solari nodded. "I will arrange for you to work with Commander Thalion of my Royal Guard. He can provide the insights you need without compromising essential security." Commander Thalion proved to be a stern, by-the-book Alorian military officer with centuries of experience. Initially reluctant to share anything with a human, he gradually warmed to Jackson as they spent days analyzing Vorash's potential strategies. "Your tactical intuition is unexpected," Thalion admitted one evening after a particularly productive session. "For a species with such brief lifespans." Jackson smirked. "We compensate by living intensely, making mistakes quickly and learning from them." "An interesting perspective." The commander studied him thoughtfully. "Is it true what they say about your marksmanship? That you once disabled a cruiser's shield generator with a single shot from an impossible distance?" "Exaggerated," Jackson replied, flexing his previously damaged hand. "Though not entirely fictional. I had certain talents before my injuries. Yet you sacrificed those talents to save your troops, according to our intelligence." Jackson's expression darkened at the memory. The Outer Rim conflicts. My unit was pinned down by automated defense systems. Someone had to reach the central control panel to deactivate them. So you charged a position no one could survive reaching. I survived. Mostly. Jackson shrugged. Leadership isn't about preservation. Commander, it's about purpose. Thalion considered this, then offered a rare gesture of respect, the Elorian military salute. Perhaps our peoples are not so different after all. Meanwhile, Solari was fighting battles of her own within the Royal Council. Opposition to her alliance with Jackson grew more vocal as days passed without Varash's capture. This human has bewitched you, accused Councillor Mavar, one of the oldest and most conservative members. He remains in our most sacred spaces, accessing information no outsider should possess, while the true threat, Vorash, gathers strength. Emperor Vale's insights have already helped us identify 3 of Varash's hidden supply caches, Solari countered. His military expertise is invaluable. His presence undermines your authority. Another counselor argued. The common people whisper that you have grown weak, dependent on human counsel. Let them whisper, Solari replied coldly. When Vorash is apprehended and his insurrection crushed, they will understand my strategy. But privately, Solari worried. Vorash's continued freedom was indeed emboldening his supporters. She needed a victory, something to demonstrate that her alliance with Jackson was bearing fruit. That opportunity came unexpectedly, through Jackson's analysis of communication patterns. There's a hidden signal embedded in routine administrative transmissions, he explained to Solari and Lyra, pointing to data streams flowing through Elorian networks. It's subtle, using your normal channels but with micro-variations that carry additional information. Impossible, Lyra objected. Our systems are protected by psionic encryption. No one except someone who helped design the encryption, Solari realized. Vorash oversaw the implementation of our current security protocols. Jackson nodded. Exactly. He built himself a backdoor, and he's using it to communicate with followers inside your government. Can we trace it? Solari asked. Better, Jackson replied with a predatory smile. We can use it to feed him false information. Make him think he has an opportunity he can't resist. A trap, Lyra concluded, reluctant admiration in her voice. Precisely. The plan they devised was daring, perhaps recklessly so. Using Varash's own communication channel, they would leak information about Solari planning to visit the floating city of Celestine, ostensibly to rally support among the regional governors. In reality, they would be prepared for Varash's inevitable attack. Celestine is a civilian center, Lyra objected during planning. If this goes wrong, thousands could die. Which is why we'll evacuate key areas beforehand, under the guise of security preparations. Jackson countered. And why we need elite troops positioned throughout the city. I will lead them personally, Commander Thalion volunteered. Solari studied the holographic model of Celestine, a marvel of Elorian engineering that hovered among the clouds, its crystalline spires catching and refracting sunlight. Vorash will know it could be a trap, but he won't be able to confirm it through his usual channels, Jackson pointed out. And the opportunity to eliminate you in such a public setting, surrounded by potential supporters, he could turn to his cause. It's too valuable to ignore. And if he doesn't take the bait? Then we've lost nothing except some preparation time, Jackson said. But he'll come. His type always does. As predicted, Vorash couldn't resist the opportunity. 3 days after their false information was planted, intelligence confirmed movement of unmarked ships toward Celestine, carrying what appeared to be elite combat units, loyal to the former Grand Vizier. The floating city of Celestine was a breathtaking sight as Solari's royal vessel approached. Unlike the main Elorian capital with its geometric precision, Celestine embodied artistic freedom, buildings of crystal and rare metals twisted into impossible shapes, connected by bridges that seemed spun from solidified light. The entire city floated on massive anti-gravity engines, drifting slowly through the upper atmosphere of Eloria's primary world. "It's beautiful," Jackson murmured, standing beside Solari on the bridge of her ship. "One of our greatest achievements," she acknowledged. "A reminder that creation should balance function with beauty." Their moment of appreciation was brief. Soon, they were engrossed in final preparations. Selected areas of the city had been quietly evacuated. Elite guards positioned in civilian attire throughout public spaces, and a special security detail, composed of both humans and Elorians who had proven their loyalty, formed around Solari and Jackson. The formal reception proceeded according to plan. Solari addressed the gathered regional governors in the Grand Promenade, a massive open space at Celestine's center, encircled by towering crystal spires. Jackson remained nearby, alert for any sign of trouble despite the seemingly peaceful proceedings. He noticed it first, a subtle shift in the city's ambient energy field. Having spent weeks in Elorian environments, he had developed a sensitivity to their technology. "Something's wrong," he whispered to Thalion. "The city's power grid is fluctuating." The commander frowned, checking his sensors. "Confirmed. Unauthorized access to the central systems." Jackson's gaze swept the crowd, looking for anything out of place. "Warn the Empress, quietly." But it was already too late for subtlety. The decorative lighting throughout the promenade suddenly dimmed, plunging the gathering into twilight. Simultaneously, the massive anti-gravity platforms beneath them shuddered. "Attention, citizens of the true Eloria," boomed a voice across the public address system. Varash's unmistakable tones carried authority and menace in equal measure. "Your false Empress has betrayed our heritage by consorting with human filth. Today, I reclaim our dignity and our destiny." Chaos erupted as disguised insurgents revealed themselves throughout the crowd. Energy weapons discharged, creating panicked stampedes as civilians fled in all directions. The Empress's guards moved to protect her, forming a defensive perimeter. "Get her to the ship," Jackson shouted to Thalion over the din. "This is a diversion." "And you," the commander called back. "I'm going to find Varash." Jackson drew the Elorian energy pistol he'd been given, checking its charge. "He'll be at the control center, trying to disable the anti-gravity engines."
"If the engines fail completely..."
"The city falls." "I know." Jackson's expression hardened. "That's why I need to stop him." Solari pushed past her guards, reaching Jackson before they could restrain her. "You cannot face him alone. Varash possesses significant psionic abilities." "With respect, Empress, you're his primary target. If you're captured or killed, everything we've worked for is lost." Jackson met her gaze steadily. "Trust me to do this." Something passed between them in that moment. Concern that transcended political alliance. A connection neither had anticipated when this partnership began. "Be careful," she said finally. "That's an Imperial command." A half-smile curved Jackson's lips. "Yes, Your Radiance." As Solari's security detail escorted her toward the landing platforms, Jackson turned in the opposite direction, toward the city's central control spire. He moved with the fluid grace of a warrior reborn, his previously damaged body now responding with perfect precision thanks to Solari's healing. The journey to the control center was harrowing. Firefights had broken out across Celestine as loyal forces engaged Varash's insurgents. Civilians caught in the crossfire added to the confusion. Twice, Jackson had to detour around collapsed walkways, where the fighting had damaged critical infrastructure. When he finally reached the base of the control spire, he found the entrance heavily guarded by troops in unmarked armor. Definitely Vorash's people. 6 of them, armed with advanced energy rifles and positioned with tactical precision. In his prime, before his injuries, Jackson might have attempted to eliminate them directly. Now, despite his healing, He opted for strategy over brute force. Accessing a service panel nearby, he used techniques learned from Elorian engineers to trigger an emergency ventilation purge. Harmless, but disorienting gas flooded the area, providing the distraction he needed. The guard's confusion lasted only seconds. But it was enough. Jackson moved like a phantom through the haze, disabling 4 guards with precise strikes before they could react. The remaining 2 managed to fire their weapons, but their aim was compromised. Jackson rolled beneath the energy beams, came up firing, and dropped both guards with well-placed stun shots. Inside the spire, emergency lighting cast everything in an eerie blue glow. Jackson moved quickly toward the central lift, only to find it disabled. "Of course," he muttered, locating the emergency access ladder instead. It would be a long climb to the control center at the spire's peak. Meanwhile, Solari's evacuation was not proceeding as planned. Her security detail had nearly reached the landing platforms when a massive explosion rocked the entire section of the city. Buildings toppled like crystal dominoes, blocking their path and separating Solari from half her guards. "Predictable," came a cold voice from behind them. "Always so predictable. Solari." She turned to find Varash himself, standing amid the wreckage, flanked by elite soldiers. The former Grand Vizier looked much as he had during his time at court, tall, aristocratic, with the silver eyes common to pure-blooded Elorians. But now, those eyes burned with fanatical purpose. "Varash!" Solari's voice remained steady despite the danger. "This insurrection will fail, as all treachery against the true crown eventually must." "True crown," he laughed bitterly. "You forsook that claim when you used the royal healing on human vermin, when you allowed an outsider into our most sacred councils." "I honored an ancient debt," she replied, "and gained an ally whose value you clearly fear, judging by this elaborate trap." Vorash's expression darkened. "Where is your human pet now, Empress, scurrying to safety while Celestine burns?" "Hardly." A small smile played at Solari's lips. "He's currently ensuring that your control over this city will be short-lived." For the first time, uncertainty flickered across Varash's features. He activated his communication device. Status report on the control center. Static answered him. Then, finally, a fragmented response. "Guards, neutralized. Intruder in the systems compromised." Rage transformed Vorash's aristocratic features into something bestial. "Kill her!" he snarled to his troops. "Kill them all!" But Solari was no helpless figurehead. As energy weapons discharged around her, she called upon her psionic abilities, powers she rarely displayed in their full capacity. A shimmering barrier of pure mental energy formed around her and her remaining guards, deflecting the deadly beams. "Commander," she called to Thalion, "get your people clear. I will handle Varash personally." The Aelorian commander hesitated only briefly before following orders, leading the guards in a strategic retreat that would draw away most of Varash's forces. Left facing each other across the rubble-strewn plaza, Empress and traitor circled like ancient duelists. "You've grown weak, Solari," Varash taunted. "The bloodline thins with each generation. In the old days, an empress could shatter mountains with her thoughts." "Perhaps," Solari's eyes began to glow with inner light. "But I've learned something you never could. Varash, there is strength in alliance, in unity, in trust." Sentimental nonsense. Their psionic powers clashed like thunderstorms colliding, invisible to normal perception but devastating in effect. Nearby structures cracked under the pressure. The very air seemed to warp around them as reality itself protested the violation of natural law. High above this confrontation, Jackson had reached the control center after an exhausting climb. The vast chamber was dominated by a central crystalline pillar that pulsed with energy, the heart of Celestine's anti-gravity system. Around it, control consoles displayed the city's status in holographic detail. 3 technicians loyal to Varash were working frantically at these consoles. They turned in shock as Jackson burst through the access hatch. "Step away from the controls," he ordered, weapon raised. The technicians exchanged glances, then complied with obvious reluctance. "Smart choice." Jackson moved to the main console, quickly assessing the situation. What he saw chilled him to the bone. "You're not just trying to take control of the city. You're overloading the engines." One of the technicians smirked. "Lord Varash's orders. If he cannot rule Celestine, no one will." Jackson studied the rapidly destabilizing energy readings. "You've initiated a cascade failure. The entire city will crash into the surface within the hour. And take the false Empress with it," another technician declared proudly. Jackson stunned all three with rapid shots, then turned his full attention to the controls. His knowledge of Elorian technology was limited, but he understood enough to recognize the gravity of the situation. The sabotage was elegant and thorough, bypassing multiple safety systems to initiate a terminal overload. He activated his communication device. "Thalion, come in."
Vale, where are you?
The commander's voice came through clearly, despite background noise that suggested ongoing fighting. "Control center. Vorash's people have initiated a cascade failure in the anti-gravity engines. The city is going down, and I can't stop it completely." There was a moment of stunned silence before Thalion responded. "How long?" "At current degradation rates, 48 minutes until catastrophic failure." "Understood. I'll begin full evacuation procedures." "Where's the Empress?"
Engaged with Varash directly.
Thalion's voice was grim. "Near the eastern landing platforms." Jackson cursed under his breath. "I need to get down there. But first..." He studied the controls again, fingers dancing across the alien interface. "I can't stop the failure, but I might be able to slow it. Buy us more time for evacuation." Using techniques he'd learned during his weeks on Eloria, Jackson implemented a series of emergency protocols. He couldn't reverse the sabotage. It was too deeply embedded in the systems. But he could reroute power, stabilize critical junctures, and extend the city's remaining operational time. "There," he muttered as the countdown indicators shifted, showing additional time. "Not a solution, but better than nothing." With the control center secured and the city's fall temporarily slowed, Jackson headed back to the access ladder. He had to reach Solari, not just for the Alliance's sake, but because something more personal drove him now. Something he wasn't ready to name, but couldn't ignore. The duel between Solari and Varash had transformed the eastern platform into a landscape of shattered crystal and twisted metal. Both combatants showed signs of strain, Solari's normally perfect composure disrupted by fatigue. Varash's aristocratic features contorted with effort and rage. "You feel it, don't you?" Varash called out, deflecting one of Solari's psionic attacks. "The city system's failing. Soon, Celestine will be nothing but debris on the surface. And with it, your reign ends." "So this was your plan from the beginning," Solari realized. "Not just to assassinate me, but to destroy one of our greatest cultural treasures. To what end, Varash? How does this serve Eloria?" "It serves justice," he roared. "You and your predecessors have led us into stagnation, into compromise with lesser beings. The ancient Elorians would rather see their works destroyed than perverted by alien influence." Their battle resumed with renewed intensity, neither able to gain a decisive advantage. Solari's techniques were more refined, her royal bloodline granting her natural power advantages. But Varash fought with the desperate strength of fanaticism. Jackson arrived at the scene in time to witness a massive psionic discharge that threw both combatants backward. Without hesitation, he rushed to Solari's side, helping her to her feet. "The city?" she asked immediately. "Failing," he confirmed. "We have maybe an hour before total collapse. Evacuation is underway." Across the platform, Voresh rose unsteadily, laughing despite his obvious injuries. "Too late, Empress. Too late for all of you. We need to get you to your ship, Jackson urged Solari, but she shook her head. Not while he remains free to threaten my people again. Her determination was palpable, but Jackson could see the toll the psionic battle had taken on her. Together, then, he decided, raising his weapon. What followed was a coordinated attack that demonstrated their growing synergy. As Solari launched a focused psionic assault that forced Varash to concentrate his defenses forward, Jackson circled to the flank, firing precisely calibrated shots that disrupted the traitor's energy field. Caught between these complementary attacks, Varash faltered. His shields weakened. His counterattacks grew less coordinated. Finally, a combined strike. Solari's psionic blast, synchronized perfectly with Jackson's pinpoint shot, broke through his defenses completely. Varash collapsed to his knees, blood trickling from his nose and ears as his overtaxed psionic abilities shut down. "It's over," Solari declared, approaching her fallen advisor with regal composure, restored despite her exhaustion. "Over?" Varash looked up with hatred burning in his silver eyes. "This is merely the beginning, Solari. My supporters are everywhere. The old ways will return, with or without me." "The old ways nearly destroyed us once before," Solari replied. "I choose evolution over extinction." Before Varash could respond, the entire city shuddered violently. Sections of flooring buckled as structural integrity fields failed throughout Celestine. "We need to go," Jackson urged. "Now." Under heavy guard, they escorted the captured Varash to Solari's royal vessel. The evacuation was proceeding as efficiently as possible given the chaos, but it was clear that not all of Celestine's inhabitants would escape in time. As their ship lifted off, Solari stood at the viewport, watching her beloved floating city begin its inexorable descent toward the surface. Tears glimmered in her luminescent eyes, though her expression remained composed. "I'm sorry," Jackson said quietly, coming to stand beside her. "Celestine was truly magnificent." "Cities can be rebuilt," she replied. "Lives cannot be replaced." They watched in somber silence as Celestine, pride of Olorian engineering and artistry, broke apart during its fall. By the time the largest fragments reached the surface, most had disintegrated into crystalline dust that sparkled in the atmosphere for days afterward, a glittering memorial to what was lost. The days following Celestine's fall were filled with political turmoil and reconstruction efforts. Varash's capture had dealt a significant blow to his insurrection, but many of his supporters remained at large. Meanwhile, Jackson's continued presence on Eloria became increasingly difficult to justify to both civilizations. "My government is insisting, really, that I return home," he explained to Solari during a rare private moment in the palace gardens. "They believe my diplomatic mission has extended well beyond reasonable limits." The Empress nodded, her expression unreadable. "Your absence has created uncertainty within your empire. This is understandable." "There's more," Jackson hesitated, then continued. "Intelligence suggests that elements within the human confederation are questioning my loyalty. Some believe I've been compromised, possibly through Elorian mind control." A flash of indignation crossed Solari's features. "We would never—" "I know," he assured her. "But fear and suspicion run deep on both sides. Our alliance, however necessary, was unprecedented." They walked in silence for a moment, following a path that wound between crystalline flowers that hummed with subtle melodies when the breeze touched them. "Perhaps it is time for you to return," Solari said finally. "Varash is contained. The immediate threat has passed." "And our work?" Jackson asked. "The foundation we've built for actual peace between our peoples?" Solari stopped walking, turning to face him directly. "That work continues, regardless of physical proximity. What we've accomplished, what we've learned about each other, cannot be undone by distance." There was something in her voice, a note of emotion that the normally composed Empress rarely revealed. Jackson found himself stepping closer, drawn by something beyond diplomatic alliance.
I will return.
He said with quiet intensity.
This isn't an ending, Solari.
No, she agreed, her luminescent eyes meeting his. It is merely a transition. The moment was interrupted by the arrival of Commander Thalion, his expression grave. Your Radiance. He addressed Solari with formal urgency. We've received disturbing reports from the Astral Fortress. Vorash? Jackson asked immediately. Thalion nodded. Security protocols have been compromised. We believe a rescue attempt is imminent. The Astral Fortress was Eloria's most secure detention facility, a massive structure that orbited the system's primary star, drawing power directly from its solar flares, designed to hold the Empire's most dangerous criminals. It was considered impenetrable, until now.
How is this possible?
Solari demanded. The fortress's security systems are isolated from all networks. We're still determining that. Your Radiance, Thalion replied. But preliminary analysis suggests activation of ancient protocols embedded in the fortress's original programming. Jackson frowned. Backdoors again. Vorash seems to have planted contingencies everywhere.
What's the status of the fortress now?
Solari asked. Still operational, but communications are intermittent. The commander reports unusual energy readings from the central containment section, where Vorash is held. Jackson and Solari exchanged troubled glances. Both recognized the implications. Whatever Vorash had planned, it was already in motion.
I need to go there,
Solari decided. Immediately. We need to go there, Jackson corrected. If Vorash escapes, everything we've worked for is at risk. Despite protests from both their respective advisors, Jackson and Solari departed for the Astral Fortress within hours. Their ship, a sleek Elorian cruiser designed for speed and stealth, cut through space toward the distant orange glow of Eloria's sun. As they approached, the fortress came into view, a massive construct of dark metal and crystal that seemed to absorb rather than reflect the sunlight. Normally, approach vectors would be tightly controlled, but they encountered no challenge from the fortress's defense systems. Too easy, Jackson commented as they docked at one of the auxiliary ports. Whatever's happening, they wanted us to arrive unimpeded. A trap, Solari agreed, but one we must spring nonetheless. They entered the fortress with a small but elite security team, moving cautiously through corridors that should have been bustling with personnel, but now stood eerily empty. Life signs? Jackson asked the security officer monitoring their sensors. Concentrated in the central containment area, the officer reported. Approximately 200 individuals. The fortress should have a complement of over 1,000, Solari noted with concern. They proceeded deeper into the structure, eventually reaching a massive security door that should have prevented access to the high security zones. It stood partially open, its control systems dark. Beyond lay scenes of conflict, scorched walls, damaged equipment, and occasionally fallen guards. The evidence suggested a coordinated assault from both outside and inside the fortress. Vorash's loyalists, Thalion surmised, examining one of the bodies. They sacrificed themselves to create this opportunity. The central containment chamber was a vast, spherical space at the fortress's core. At its center hovered a crystalline structure that pulsed with energy, the specialized cell designed to contain prisoners with psionic abilities. As they entered the chamber, they found it filled with Vorash's followers, some in Elorian military uniforms, others in civilian attire, all armed and arrayed in defensive positions around the central cell. And there, suspended within the energy field, was Vorash himself. But something was wrong. Instead of appearing imprisoned, the former Grand Vizier seemed to be in a state of communion with the containment field. Energy flowed not just around him, but through him. His body, serving as a conduit for power that shouldn't have existed in this secure environment. At last, Vorash's voice echoed throughout the chamber, though his lips didn't move. The Empress and her human pet arrived to witness the rebirth.
What have you done, Vorash?
Solari demanded. The traitor's physical form smiled, while his psionic voice continued to reverberate around them. I have merely awakened what has always been here. Solari. The astral fortress holds secrets, even the royal line has forgotten. As if responding to his words, the entire chamber began to transform. What had appeared to be solid walls rippled like liquid, revealing ancient inscriptions and technological interfaces of a design neither Jackson nor Solari recognized. The First Empire, Solari whispered in shock. This facility is built upon one of their constructs. Jackson had heard references to the First Empire during his time on Eloria, a semi-mythical civilization that had preceded even the ancient Elorians, leaving behind technologies that defied modern understanding. Yes, Vorash confirmed, his physical body now glowing with increasing intensity. And their weapons remain, waiting for one with the knowledge to use them. Weapons? Jackson questioned sharply. What weapons? Instead of answering directly, Vorash began a chant in an ancient dialect that few living Elorians could comprehend. As the syllables echoed through the chamber, the hidden interfaces responded, glowing with increasing brightness. He's activating something, Jackson warned, raising his weapon. We need to stop him now. But the security team's energy weapons proved useless against the containment field, which had expanded to create a barrier between Vorash and his attackers. Solari stepped forward, her own psionic powers manifesting visibly around her. Enough, Vorash. Whatever you intend, it ends here. She launched a concentrated mental attack against the barrier. Her power, impressive even to those accustomed to Elorian abilities. For a moment, the containment field wavered, showing vulnerabilities. Seeing the opportunity, Jackson analyzed the fluctuation patterns, his tactician's mind identifying the weakness in the energy matrix. There, he called to Solari, indicating a specific point where her attack had caused the most disruption. Focus there. Their coordination, honed through weeks of working together, proved effective. As Solari concentrated her psionic assault on the weak point, Jackson calculated the precise moment and location to strike with his weapon. The combined attack breached the containment field momentarily, enough for a single shot to penetrate. But in that critical moment, Jackson hesitated. Something was wrong about the scenario. Vorash seemed too confident, too eager for their intervention. Wait, he called to Solari. It's what he wants. Too late. The Empress's power had already created the breach, and one of the security team fired, striking Vorash directly. But instead of harming him, the energy shot was absorbed, catalyzing a reaction that spread throughout the ancient systems. Yes, Vorash exulted, as his body began to dissolve into pure energy. The final component, directed energy through the catalyst. The chamber erupted into chaos. The ancient systems, dormant for millennia, awakened fully. The fortress itself began to transform, reconfiguring into something altogether more sinister. And at the center of it all, Vorash's consciousness expanded, merging with the fortress systems. What is happening? Jackson demanded of Solari as they sought cover from falling debris. Her expression was one of horror and realization. The legends speak of vessels, constructs that could house consciousness when physical forms failed. I never believed. She looked at him with grave concern. If Vorash has activated such technology and merged with it, he becomes the fortress, Jackson concluded. A living weapon. As if confirming their fears, Vorash's voice boomed throughout the structure, now emanating from the very walls. Not just this fortress, Empress. This is merely the beginning. The First Empire built a network of such facilities throughout the galaxy. Once fully activated, they will cleanse the stars of all lesser beings. Monitors throughout the chamber activated, showing massive energy buildups in the fortress's primary systems. Weapon platforms long hidden were emerging from dormancy, orienting toward Alorian space. "We need to shut it down," Jackson stated, already scanning the exposed ancient interfaces for anything resembling a control system. "There has to be a way to interrupt the activation sequence." Solari joined him, her knowledge of ancient Alorian languages providing insight into the enigmatic symbols. There, she indicated a pulsing crystalline formation near what had been Varash's containment cell. "That appears to be the primary power nexus, but disrupting it would require a precise shot at the resonance core," Jackson finished, studying the formation. "One shot, at exactly the right frequency, to create a cascade disruption." Their eyes met, both understanding the implications. Such a shot would require exceptional marksmanship, the kind Jackson had once been legendary for, before his injuries. Even with Solari's healing, such precision under these conditions would be challenging. More concerning was the likely outcome for whoever took the shot. The energy backlash would be substantial, possibly fatal. "I'll do it," Jackson said, adjusting his weapon to the calculated frequency. "Jackson," Solari began, uncharacteristic emotion breaking through her imperial composure. "It's what I came here for," he said simply. "To protect both our peoples." Before she could object further, the fortress shuddered violently. External monitors showed energy beams lancing out toward Alorian space, the first salvos in what would become a genocidal campaign, if not stopped. "Go!" Jackson urged Solari and the others. "Get clear of the immediate blast radius. I need a clear line of sight anyway." Commander Thalion hesitated, then offered a respectful salute before leading the security team toward the exit. Solari remained, her expression a complex mixture of emotions that transcended language barriers. "This isn't goodbye," Jackson assured her with a confidence he didn't entirely feel. "Just cover." After a moment's hesitation, Solari nodded and moved to a protected position behind a structural support column. From there, she could observe without distracting him. Alone in the center of the chamber, Jackson faced the pulsing crystalline formation that now served as Varash's heart. The rogue Grand Vizier's consciousness, spread throughout the fortress systems, seemed to realize his intention. Foolish human," Varash's voice reverberated. "Even if you could make such a shot, the energy release would incinerate you instantly." "Probably," Jackson agreed, taking careful aim. "But it would stop you. Fair trade." He emptied his mind of everything except the target, falling into the state of perfect focus that had once made him legendary. His awareness expanded to encompass every variable, the subtle vibrations of the fortress, the energy fluctuations within the crystal, the minute adjustments needed to hit the exact resonance point. Time seemed to slow as he exhaled and squeezed the trigger. The energy beam lanced out with perfect accuracy, striking the crystal's resonance core with mathematical precision. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then, the crystal began to vibrate, emitting a high-pitched whine that quickly became painful to hear. Cracks appeared across its surface, leaking brilliant white energy. "No!" Varash's voice roared, as his consciousness recognized the coming destruction. "I cannot be denied." The crystal shattered with catastrophic force, releasing a shockwave of pure energy that expanded outward. Jackson, still standing at the epicenter, was engulfed immediately. From her protected position, Solari watched in horror as the man who had twice saved her, first from an assassin's bolt, now from Varash's insanity, disappeared within a column of blinding light. The shockwave continued outward, but dissipated before reaching her position, the ancient structure somehow containing the worst of the blast. When the light faded and she could see again, the crystalline formation was gone, as were all signs of Varash's consciousness. The ancient interfaces had gone dark, the weapon platforms fallen dormant once more. But of Jackson Vale, there was no sign, only a scorched area where he had stood. "No," Solari whispered, rushing forward despite the residual energy still crackling through the air. No, this cannot be. She reached the blackened floor where Jackson had made his final stand, kneeling there as her guards cautiously approached. For perhaps the first time in her reign, the Empress of Eloria showed raw emotion before others, her composure cracking like the shattered crystal. But as her hand touched the scorched surface, something unexpected happened. Her innate psionic abilities, heightened by emotional intensity, detected a faint resonance, a whisper of consciousness not fully extinguished. Jackson's mind, or some essence of it, still existed, scattered, fragmented, but present. Without hesitation, Solari called upon her full royal power, the ancient abilities that had allowed her to heal Jackson once before. This time, however, the challenge was far greater, not merely repairing a damaged body, but gathering a dispersed consciousness and anchoring it back to physical form.
Your radiance,
Lyra protested, having arrived with reinforcements.
the royal healing was never meant for this. You risk your own life.
Solari ignored her, focusing entirely on the delicate psychic operation. Her body began to glow with the same energy that had engulfed Jackson, establishing a connection between his dispersed essence and her own life force. Time lost meaning as Solari worked, drawing upon ancestral knowledge and instinctive techniques that transcended formal training. She followed the fading threads of Jackson's consciousness, gathering them, strengthening them, pulling them back toward cohesion. Finally, when her own strength was nearly exhausted, a miracle occurred. The scattered energy coalesced, taking physical form once more. Lying unconscious on the scorched floor was Jackson Vale, restored, but deeply unconscious. Solari collapsed beside him, her own life energy dangerously depleted. As darkness claimed her awareness, her final thought was one of profound satisfaction. Whatever came next, she had repaid her debt in full. The aftermath of the Astral Fortress incident marked a turning point in relations between humanity and the Aelorian Empire. With Vorash's threat neutralized and his conspiracy exposed, political barriers that had once seemed insurmountable began to crumble. Both Jackson and Solari required extensive recovery. He from the molecular disruption caused by the energy release. She from the dangerous depletion of her life force during his rescue. For weeks, they recuperated in adjacent healing chambers within the crystalline palace, their conditions closely monitored by the finest medical minds of both civilizations. When Jackson finally regained consciousness, it was Solari who greeted him, her own recovery slightly ahead of his. "I was told you nearly died saving me," he said, his voice hoarse from disuse. "Again."
As you nearly died saving me,
she replied with unusual gentleness.
again.
A smile tugged at his lips. "We should probably stop making this a habit." "Perhaps." Her luminescent eyes studied him with an intensity that transcended political alliance. "Though I find I do not regret it." Their shared experience had forged something unprecedented, a bond between leaders of traditionally opposed civilizations that went beyond diplomatic necessity into genuine understanding and respect. This personal connection became the foundation for a formal alliance. The Bone Veil Accords, named for both leaders, established frameworks for cooperation in areas ranging from security to cultural exchange. More significantly, they codified a new principle in Aelorian law, the Bone Veil Precedent, which stated that any being who saved the life of an Aelorian empress or emperor would be accorded the highest respect and protection, regardless of species or origin. When the time finally came for Jackson to return to human space, the farewell was not conducted as a state ceremony, but as a private meeting between equals. "This isn't an ending," Solari said, echoing his words from their earlier parting. "Just a transition," Jackson completed with a smile. "The work continues."
Indeed,
she hesitated, then added,
the Council has proposed regular summit meetings between our governments. Quarterly.
At least initially. Meaning we'll see each other again soon.
It would seem so.
Neither acknowledged the personal significance of this arrangement, but neither needed to. Some understandings transcended verbal expression. As Jackson's ship departed Alorian space, observers noted something unprecedented: the Empress herself providing an honor guard escort to the system's edge. Her royal vessel flying alongside the human emperors in a visual symbol of their new alliance. Across both civilizations, the story spread. How an emperor had taken a shot meant for an empress. How ancient enemies had become allies against a common threat. How two leaders had each nearly sacrificed everything to save the other. It became known as the Dawn Alliance, the beginning of a new era of cooperation between species that had once seemed destined only for conflict. In the years that followed, the galaxy watched as human technology and Elorian psionic science began to intermingle, creating innovations neither civilization could have achieved alone. Cultural exchanges flourished, with human art galleries featuring Elorian crystal sculptures, while Elorian educational institutions studied human literature and philosophy. And if observers noted that the quarterly summit meetings between Emperor Vale and Empress Solari often extended beyond their scheduled durations, or that their formal communications contained private codes and references understood only by them. Such details were considered diplomatic curiosities rather than matters of state. What mattered was the peace, the shared dawn that illuminated a galaxy that had stood on the brink of devastating war and found instead an unexpected path to harmony. A path forged by an empress who learned that true justice transcended power, and an emperor who discovered that his greatest service to humanity would come not through combat, but through courage of a different kind. Their personal story remained largely private, known fully only to them. But their legacy, the Bone Veil Alliance, would reshape the stars for generations to come. Proof that even the most entrenched enmities could yield to something greater when individuals chose sacrifice over suspicion and cooperation over conflict.